Okay, so we're going to go on ahead and get started again. Having discussed no other issues other than personnel matters related to our executive director, we're going to come out of closed session out here. We don't typically do that, but we're going to do that now. So a motion to come out of closed session.
Second.
Okay, and a roll call vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, and then a motion to come back into open session, I guess, and start with the CPOA policies and procedures under item 9.
I second the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. So, item 9 on our agenda. Who is leading that discussion? I'm going to assume it's going to come from that table over there.
Chair Galloway, at the last board meeting, Member Olivas presented to the board a unanimous motion to the court to add, motion to the board, to add Robert's Rules of Order training for the board to have when new members are appointed, as well as annual refresher training on Robert's Rules of Order, as well as general meeting conduct and operation. The board, I believe, voted unanimously on that, and what I've presented to you is the amendment to the policies and procedures that will reflect the addition of training on Robert's Rules of Order, general meeting conduct and operation as part of the policies and procedures that were heard or approved or taken under the receipt be noted by City Council earlier this month under Section B. And then the red line also talks about, as the board had voted unanimously, to include the Roberts Rules training occurring annually as well. And so you have a red line. It's very, very limited. There's 2 parts to the red line that incorporates the Roberts Rules of Order training that the board had voted on. I had asked Member Olivas if I could present that to the board so that we have approval of the final format of those policies and procedures before they're posted on the website and implemented by the board.
I'm sorry, is this something that we have in our packet?
It was in the email.
It was the email, okay.
I move that we ratify or pass or whatever the amended procedures.
Okay.
I have a question. There's a couple, I read through this just to be sure, and there's several places where the POB is listed as the POB. So a search engine change might help with that. Does that make sense? It's just a simple thing, but I think that we're trying, let's say on page 5, at the top of the page, first sentence, it says POB. It says it several other times throughout the training, so if somebody could just search and replace POB for board, that would be great.
Can I address that? I think that's a separate issue from the amendment we're talking about, but I think you're talking about the entire
Right.
document.
Right, if
where
we're
there's
ratifying the whole
changes.
thing.
Yeah.
That's what I thought you meant, ratifying the whole thing.
I don't know.
Okay,
However,
I don't know what
whatever
order it goes
works.
in, but there needs to be a change on that.
So could we, not sure the procedure for this, but could we amend the motion to add changing those instances of POB to 2 separate motions? So
I think-
we can act on the, I don't know, we can act on one.
Yeah.
So the motion and the second to approve the language
Approve
changes
the
for Robert's Rules of Order?
Yeah, so my motion was to approve the amendment, and that has been seconded, so.
Okay, any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any
And then now
opposed?
yours.
I would just suggest that the policies and procedures not say POB, and wherever it does say POB, it be replaced with board.
Chair Galloway, Vice Chair Fine, just to confirm that we're all talking about the same thing. I see it in 2 places. I see it.
It's on page 13 as well.
On page 5,
Right.
section G, where it talks about POB members. And then I see it on
Page 13.
page 13. I don't see it anywhere else. For purposes of possibly Moving,
In many places, it does say board, but it does have a couple of dangling POBs in there. That's all, just a search and replace.
I'll second your motion.
Thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Does that conclude that agenda item?
Yeah,
Yes?
I believe so.
Okay. All right, moving on to item 10 on our agenda. 10A, administratively closed cases. Member St. John?
Yes, so how we have the administratively closed cases, and for the record, I always just read them out, fast, so if somebody comes back, they can see that their case was heard. So we have 00619, 10519, 12819, 14619, 16619, 17419, 19419, 04019, 10619, 12919, 15519, 16719, 17619, 19519, 05019, 11419, 13019, 15619, 16817, 17719, 20717, 26919, 11518, 13219, 16019, 16819, 18119, 21417, 07319, 11918, 13319, 16119, 16919, 18819, 09818, 12519, 13719, 16319, 17319, 19319. And do we have a motion on the table to accept the findings?
Move to accept the administratively closed cases.
Second?
Any
Madam Chair,
discussion?
Oh,
I'd like to,
excuse, any discussion?
I'd like to open a discussion on 4 cases.
Okay.
So I believe Director Harness is aware of these cases. I did send him an email before the last meeting when I thought these cases were going to be heard. There's no cases from the new batch that I had questions on. Director Harness, are you familiar with the questions I had?
What are the 4 cases?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So we have 16719, 114,
Wait, don't go so
Wait, wait,
fast.
wait.
16719,
16719, 11419,
gotcha.
06919,
06919.
and 07319.
069. Wait a second, 06919, and what was the last one?
07319. Should be right next to that one. Last one.
073.
Chair
I
Galloway,
got it.
Member Olivas, if you would, I know that I reviewed those questions, but could you re-ask them?
Certainly. So starting with, let's see here, we'll just start with 16719. There was a claim in the complainant's statement that red swollen knuckles were observed, and there's no mention in the report of whether that was refuted or confirmed by lapel camera footage. It does appear from the report that lapel camera footage was reviewed, so I'm wondering if that was ever encountered. or was that
Member
refuted?
Galloway, I'm sorry, Chair Galloway, Member Olivas, this was actually an investigation that I did. There were no allegations at the time of what was in the complaint about the red knuckles. Based upon my review, the officer made the proper judgment that probable cause existed for the male in this encounter to be arrested for domestic violence. And that's what occurred. The complainant made no mention of those allegations on scene. That's something that came about in her complaint.
So for the next one, let's see here. 11419. The original complaint details, forgive me, it's been a while since I read through these, it's the last batch, but it details that there was a muted recording, but there's no mention of this in the investigation. Does that conflict with policy at all? Was there a potential policy violation there if there was a muting, and was that investigated?
Chair Galloway, Member Olivas, the current OBRD policy, or the policy that was in place during this complaint time, does not address muting, and so there is no policy violation for muting, and it is an ongoing concern for 2-8, as Member Vandeventer pointed out this evening.
Great, thank you. The next one, 069-19. So it's noted in there that a policy violation occurred with regards to lapel camera footage, but no disciplinary action was recommended for that. In past investigations that have come through this board, we've seen disciplinary action recommended for the same violation. So why the inconsistency there?
Chair Galloway, Member Olivas, the reason for no disciplinary action in this case is because it was beyond the investigative timelines. It was discovered at the end of the investigation. This was originally a traffic citation case, and the lack of recording was discovered beyond the timeline.
Thank you.
Forgive me, let me just push that. Is that the collective bargaining agreement timeline? Is that what you're referring to?
Chair Galloway, that's the collective bargaining agreement, the CASA, and ordinance as well.
Okay, and so is it that we can't make a disciplinary recommendation, or disciplinary action cannot occur? Because those are two separate things, right?
Chair Galloway, disciplinary action cannot occur.
Okay, so we could still make a recommendation for consistency's sake, that, or some language that says, had this fallen within the timelines afforded us, this is the disciplinary action that would have been recommended, but so that it's documented someplace?
Chair Galloway, they are currently not documenting any discipline that falls outside of the timeline.
I know that, well, I won't say I know that you're not.
For the purposes of the officer's personnel file. So they are currently not doing that. It is a practice that is under discussion, but they will not currently add any discipline finding that cannot be instituted.
But what they do versus what we do are two different things, correct?
Chair Galloway, sure. We could make a recommendation.
I'm just saying for
I mean-
documentation purposes, and that way if it comes up again that this is what it should have been, we've got it for consistency, so it doesn't look as though we do it sometimes but not others. That's the point, just to kind of tidy up our end of things.
Is it possible that if we did adjust our letter that way, that it wouldn't end up in the personnel file because it would violate the contract with the union?
Chair Galloway, Vice Chair Fine, that's correct.
How would it violate the contract with the union, because we don't impose discipline? And discipline wouldn't be imposed because they can't do it, it's just a documentation of, this is what it should have been. This is what, if we were within the timeline afforded by the collective bargaining agreement and et al., this is what it should have been.
Chair Galloway, I think the fact that you're making a recommendation that it was a violation, even that letter indicating that going into a personnel file, I believe, would be violative.
Question. So do administratively closed complaint letters go into personnel files?
No. Yeah, that's separate, isn't
That's
it? Because a finding letter goes to the complainant, and that's what we're talking about here, is the finding letter to the complainant. If and when we make disciplinary action, that's a separate letter that's addressed to the chief of police, right?
Right.
Chair Galloway, actually, they're the same letter. I mean, the letter The letter that goes to the chief is the letter that goes to the complainant. We don't do a separate letter.
But do those administratively closed letters that go to the chief, do those even go in the file if they're, I don't know, I'm asking.
Chair Galloway, Member Olivas, if there's a named officer, certainly, then they would be tracked in that way.
But Director Harness, I thought one of the primary arguments you usually make for administrative closure is that it doesn't appear whatsoever anywhere in anyone's personnel file. The fact that there was an inquiry does not even appear. And you've argued that that's a benefit to the officer of an administrative closure. So that contradicts what you just said, that it goes in their file if they're named? I don't understand.
Well, let me find out and get
Okay.
the exact answer.
That's fair. I think that if there's a way for us to document, because I think that's a good point.
I do
There's
too.
there's no record kept to ensure that we're being consistent, and there should be.
Well, whether or not they choose to put it in the file, in our file, it's right.
Yeah.
So I think that they may or may not do it, and I think it's a really good point, Mr. Olivas, about the administratively closed cases, whether they go in or not. But regardless of that, shouldn't prevent us from making sure that it was clear. I also think that it's important to consider, and I don't know where the appropriate place is, but if something cannot be disciplined because it's expired, I would like there to be a trail that said why it expired. I mean, what happened to make us get past the deadline? What were the obstacles in the path? And because if we don't document that, it just looks like we didn't do it, and we have no way of knowing or learning from that. So I just think there ought to be more information, not only about this, but about the why did we miss,
Delay.
discipline.
So then Director Harness, you've agreed to find out the answer to that question. Can you provide that to the case review committee, and then the case review committee come to the board with a proposed solution for this problem at the next meeting?
Sure.
Yay. Okay.
I have
one
one more here. So this one I think was a little bit different than the other three. This is CPC 073-19. And basically this was an incident where a complainant was involved. Got to think back here exactly what happened. Involved in some sort of traffic incident. They were issued a citation, and basically things got lost in the court system. And it sounds to me like they had a very, very hard time, a pretty extreme hardship imposed on this person to resolve that issue with this errant ticket or warrant or something like that. And basically the findings letter gives basically no assurances that this will not occur again, and gives no real reason why this happened. The officer didn't seem to know what happened on their end. The courts didn't know what happened. MVD didn't know what happened. This just seems like a really frustrating issue for anybody. It could literally happen to any one of us. And the complainant, it actually seemed very unique among our complaints. The complainant's preferred outcome was actually that they don't want this to happen to anyone else, because it was so frustrating and so difficult for them to solve that situation. So I feel like that's a place where we really need to be vigilant of what we can do, or what the department can do better to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again. So that's kind of a broad question, but I really felt like this left a lot of questions to be answered. The investigation seemed very thorough as far as talking to the officer, looking at those sorts of things, but it didn't really answer his complaint or the outcome he sought.
Chair Galloway, Member Olivas, the board and the agency has previously recommended a tracking process for citations, and it has made that recommendation for other circumstances where citations somehow are lost in the system. Currently, the electronic systems do not communicate with each other, And so the recommendation previously submitted is to come up with just a simple log, a paper log, where the citations are signed in when they're dropped into the intake box at the substation before they're taken over to Metro Court. And that has been the solution that was offered previously. Beyond trying to prevent it from happening again, that's the solution that's been offered previously.
We made that recommendation like 3 months ago, so possibly it's something we should have heard back about by now from the chief. So I will follow up and try to get us some responses to those recommendations that went out at this point 3 months ago, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Director Harness.
Is that it?
Yes.
Are you comfortable moving this vote forward? Are there any changes you would like to see made in any of the findings letters?
At this point, I don't see anything. You know, the discrepancy in 069-19 as far as discipline, I understand the reason that Director Harness is giving there as to why it wasn't recommended. I guess my concern is just that as far as making sure that we look as impartial and transparent and even-handed as possible, I think that we need to work towards a way to add that, even if we can't formally recommend discipline, that it would have been recommended had timelines not expired, and include that in the letter to the complainant too, so that they know that something was wrong. And then, as I think it was Member Fine said, why did it take us whatever time it was, 2 years or however long it took to respond, and that's the reason we didn't meet the deadline. I think the complainant deserves an answer as to that.
So as far as 06919 goes, would you like to hold that for 1 month and see if we come up with a recommendation from the committee? I mean, how old was that case?
It's originally from January 28th, 2019.
I don't know if I'm unsure about that. I'm not really sure if I want to hold up the case for that reason, but at the same time, I'm not sure we have any assurances that we'll get back to this without that catalyst. So I don't know if there's other members of the board that have an opinion on that.
I kind of think, my opinion is that if we're going to look to make a possible change, rather than saying, oh, we'll get it on the next one, do it where we found the problem. It's 1 more month after 9.
You know, I agree with that. Why don't we just table this case and put it on next month's agenda?
For a rewrite, is that the reason?
Yeah, the findings letter. See what the committee decides might be a solution for how to address those issues.
Okay.
And my preference is this doesn't become a micromanaging issue. I don't want to tell the director how this letter needs to read. I just sort of want everybody to work together to come up with a solution where this can be consistent, and then we can move forward with that on other cases where this might apply. So with that being said, I guess I'd make a motion to
I think there's a motion.
table the
No
case.
one, no one
Or-
did it.
Huh?
I
No
think
one made the
Valerie
motion.
and
Joanne did.
Oh,
Yeah, I think
Oh, okay.
Valerie made a motion and I seconded. So
Oh,
if
okay.
there's anything else you don't want to pull out, well, we probably need to amend the motion to get 06919 out of this pot.
oh, I understand.
So vote it down and do a new one, yep.
Okay.
See, I'm gonna learn. I'm gonna get this right.
We're all learning.
Okay, so all in favor of administratively closing all of the cases in administratively closed classification? All in favor, aye? And all opposed?
Aye.
Okay. So, new motion on the floor to approve all of the administratively closed cases with the exception of 069-19.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I motioned,
I
Joanne
seconded.
seconded. Okay, so we're gonna hold that one out. Okay, next on the agenda is case 146-17. It is the exonerated case. Member St. John?
Okay, okay, do I have a motion to accept the findings in this case? Or
Is that what the committee recommended?
Okay, what?
You're making a motion.
Oh, excuse me, I'd like to make a motion to accept the findings in case 146-17.
Second.
Have a
Okay,
second?
and you had a question about that?
No.
No? Okay. Any other questions?
Just one quick question. Just to confirm, I believe that as of the date of this incident was May 17, 2017. There was not electronic proof of insurance allowed within city limits in city of Albuquerque at that point in time.
Chair Galloway, Member Olivas, I will have to pull up the letter, and if that's what's stated in the investigation, then I would stand by what's stated.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, item C on the agenda is case 132-18. It is requested by the complainant that he be granted an appeal.
I motion that we grant the appeal in this case.
I'll second the motion.
Why?
Because
Open for discussion.
because the complainant sufficiently satisfied all of the criteria for making a request for an appeal.
Do you want to review which ones those were? Which criteria?
One moment, please.
Is this what you're looking for?
Okay. A, the APD policy or APD policies that were considered by POB were the wrong policies or they were used in the wrong way. I think this 11-page document lays out an extremely compelling case that in many instances, the wrong policies were considered or were used in the wrong way. B, the APD policy or APD policies considered by the POB were chosen randomly or they do not address the issues in your complaint. I would not agree that the CPOA randomly chose policies, but I believe they chose policies that did not address the issues in the complaint. And I believe the complainant satisfies that criteria within the 11-page document that we received justifying the appeal. The findings of the POB had no explanation that would lead to the conclusions made by the POB. I think there are multiple instances in the findings letter where conclusions are, or where there are assertions made that are unsupported and illogical, and that the complainant pointed those out to us in his compelling 11-page document. D, the findings by the POB were not supported by the evidence that was available to the POB at the time of the investigation. I believe that criteria was also satisfied. That's what I got. I mean, I can read the document aloud. We
No,
might be
I've
here
read
for a
it
couple of
several
hours.
times.
But, yeah.
I didn't come to the same conclusions.
Member Van Venter, I'd like to offer a friendly amendment to that. This has languished here at the CPA, at the agency and with the board too, partially through the board's own inaction or differing views on it, in my opinion. I think the complainant put a lot of effort into this. Clearly, did his homework on this and is seeking an action here. In my view, more so in a policy sense than a discipline sense, and that's what City Council wants this board to be working on, is policy, big picture. How do we keep these things from happening again? And my concern with granting an appeal outright is that we are sending the appeal back to the agency for what I believe will be a fourth or a fifth time, expecting to get a different result. So it would seem to me that we should, I think we should grant the appeal, but with some conditions to perhaps contract this outside of the agency or otherwise get a second look at this, because I think it's a really important case. This is dealing with child abuse, this is dealing with evidence handling, this is dealing with a lot of big picture issues that affect the entire city, and we don't really do it justice by sort of trying to, we need some outside help on this, and I don't mean to criticize the agency or the director and imply that a thorough investigation wasn't done here. I'm just trying to think of how we can get a better handle on what is a very large and complex complaint.
I would support that, but my only hiccup is I don't know that we have the authority to reopen this case ourselves using an appeal to do that. I don't know that an appeal and having the complainant come in and, make his case wouldn't afford us that at that time, but I don't know if we can just do it now.
Oh, sure.
I don't know. Welcome to hear thoughts on that.
Would you explain what the process is from this point forward and how it applies, or whether it applies to this, how it would apply to this case?
Chair Galloway, member Dr. Cass, if the board were to grant the appeal, then the board would conduct a hearing in accordance with your policies and procedures. And it's outlined that how that hearing would take place. So the presentation by the complainant, a presentation by the CPOA, a presentation by APD, the board has the ability to ask questions, and then the board will render a decision. It's outlined in your policies and procedures how that hearing will be conducted. There is no opportunity for contracting out a new investigation or any such thing at this point.
I have a question, a follow-up question on that. Tina, could I ask you, pursuant to our authority, and I think we would do this like at the next meeting or if we did do it at all, but pursuant to our audit authority, in a case as complex as this with the information we've received, which is like highly, highly detailed and somewhat voluminous, if the board were to request an audit and pass a motion for an audit on this case successfully, could the board contract its own audit out? Because I think the audit provision contemplates the board performing the audit. But perhaps like in this case, we might consider doing an audit where we contract out our own audit. And maybe that makes it a little less tense, and maybe there's some benefits to that. And we could consider that separately from the appeal. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Chair Galloway, Board Member Van Deventer, the policies for an audit for the board state, and I'll read it because I don't think it's something that has been presented to the board recently or something that you all have looked at anytime in recently. The board may, by majority vote, perform an annual audit or direct that an audit be performed on a random sample of up to 10% of individual civilian police complaint investigations involving allegations of use of force. Not material to your question, but the first part of the paragraph on audits. The second sentence of the section on audits says, in exceptional circumstances, for the purpose of promoting an enhanced measure of quality assurance in the most challenging cases, the board may, by a vote of 2/3 of the members of the board, perform an audit or direct that an audit be performed on an individual civilian complaint investigation by the CPOA. That does not answer your question, Member Van Deventer, specifically as to if the board has the authority to hire an independent investigator to do that investigation as part of the audit function, but I think that it's broad enough that it says the board shall perform the audit or direct that an audit be performed. And it doesn't say to whom the board should direct the audit be performed. It clearly just says the board shall or direct that one be performed. I don't know whether there is a budget for that. I don't know, prior to my representation of this board, if you'd ever hired an independent investigator or utilized your audit function, but it may be something that we can work with our city finance side to see if there's approved vendors for that or how that process would work.
I have a follow-up, and that is, what's the definition of an audit according to this, to our process?
Hold on, let me see if there's a definition. I don't believe we have one. Chair Galloway and the rest of the board and anyone following along, I am on page 20 of the redlined versions that the board voted on this evening. So I'm not sure if that messed up page numbers with the red lines or not, but it's section 11 of article, let me see. It's a long article. I apologize for the delay while I'm scrolling. Article 5, section 11. Chair Galloway and Board Member Dr. Cass, there is no definition of audit provided in your policies and procedures. So I don't know that I can provide you a defined term for purposes of the discussion this evening.
Do we have any precedent for an audit?
Chair Galloway and Board Member Dr. Cass, that's something that in the 2 years I've been representing the board, I can say, no, you have not utilized this function, but prior to my involvement, I don't know.
I can answer that. We haven't.
I have a question. Tina, the board has, the committee and the board have sent this back for more investigation a couple of times, this particular case. This is not my position, but I know that the belief exists on the board that that investigation didn't change, that it didn't, there are some people who have said it didn't happen. So you have a board who has requested more investigation on particular issues. Tell me if I'm wrong on this, but are unsatisfied that that happened. If that's the case, then I assume that we had the right to send it back for further investigation in the first place, right?
Chair Galloway, Vice Chair Fine, yes, as long as the board had voted, and I believe the board has voted on many occasions to, and this case and any others, for a request for more information, that rather than taking a position, that the board can send it back to the agency for further investigation.
Okay, so if there is a supposition on the part of some board members that that didn't happen, that that assignment was requested and it didn't occur, would that then not allow us to, if we are unsatisfied in the answer or the lack of answers that we received in that, can we then move it out to get it done by somebody else?
Chair Galloway, Board Member Fine, the way that it appears on the agenda, it looks to me as though this case 13218 has previously been accepted in some manner, and that then it was The complainant was dissatisfied, requested an appeal, and now the question before the board is whether to grant that appeal based on the board's prior action. So in this particular case, on this particular instance, the procedural posture, I believe, means that the board should continue through its policies and procedures as to how to deal with the appeal. Now, if there's an issue that the board believes meets the audit requirements of the 2/3 vote for this particular case that I previously read, that would be a different matter. But because of the way this appears on the agenda, I can only assume that the board previously had
Oh, then we
accepted
must
a
have passed it.
recommendation?
We did pass it.
You
Okay.
passed it,
I'm
yeah.
in total agreement
Yeah.
with you, and I think that the first
I
thing that we
skipped
have
that
to
part
deal with
in my
is
head,
the
sorry.
appeal, and whether or not this body wants to grant an appeal. We have a motion and a second to grant the appeal. Any additional discussion on that matter? Okay, all in favor of granting an appeal in case 132 or 18, is that right?
132,
132, 18? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm opposed.
And you're opposed? Okay, you got that? Okay. I would like to, I think that probably the safest bet is to put on next month's agenda an audit, a spot on the agenda for discussion and possible action on whether or not to audit this case. Okay?
And
But we have
Should
to
we make a motion
proceed
for
with the
that?
appeal anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna do the appeal. I don't think we can motion on it yet.
no, just motion to place it on the agenda.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
But Tina's
the-
nodding,
the-
so I'm
the-
gonna say we can go on ahead and do that.
The chair drafts the agenda, so
Well, in theory, but just to tighten it up, given some other discussions, I think that's probably a good idea. We can do that, right? Motion to add this item on the agenda for next month, even though it's not here?
Chair Galloway, yes, you may motion to add stuff to your agenda for next board meeting.
Okay, so I'm making that motion that we place on the agenda an audit discussion and possible action
For 13218.
for 13218.
I second your motion.
Okay? Any other discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You're opposed?
I'm opposed.
No? You're good? Okay. So I think it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay. I lost my agenda in all the shuffle. So that ends that. There's no serious use of force cases or officer-involved shootings. There are no cases up for approval to review Garrity materials. We've already done our closed session. Is there any other business? Yes, sir.
Yes, Chair Galloway, the issue of a board member sending a letter to the court, I think it's an issue that needs to be discussed.
We've had a partial discussion as far as personnel, how it ties into personnel-related matters. What would you like to discuss?
Well, Chair Galloway, I think the fact that it happened, how it occurred, who did it, what was the motivation, the ramifications for the agency and the board for that kind of individual action, I think are all very serious matters.
Are you, this is part of our discussion on the personnel, I'm sorry, on the personnel side, was some of us assumed that, your idea was that it was a board member who sent it because it was a board member who got it. But Dr. Cass enlightened us and read us the letter, and we realized that it could have been anyone. Do you have
Chair-
other information on that?
Chair Galloway, Vice Chair Fine. That's possible. However, the email itself was only sent to board members. And so therefore, a board member had to give it to somebody to send it to the court. However, I have a very strong belief that it was a board member that sent it to the
Do you have
court.
evidence to that effect?
I have some indicators, yes.
Well, are you going to share them with us?
Have there been any IPRA requests that would have potentially picked this item up that you're aware of? I'm not sure if you can disclose that to begin with, but.
Chair Galloway, Member Olivas, no, there have been no IPRA requests. So it was not disseminated through an IPRA request or any other way. And it was not forwarded from other board members' emails either.
Because you did a check of our emails.
I did.
So it didn't come from our emails?
No.
Nobody
it
forwarded
was-
the email.
No one forwarded the email. It was printed and mailed, it was downloaded and printed and mailed to the court.
If I could clarify what I said and what I intended to convey from reading the letter, the wording of the letter was such that it did not indicate that they had received this information directly from you, but that it was a letter written by you to the court or to the POB and about the court. And I think it's just raised the possibility. If you have evidence to the contrary, which would be exactly what you quoted, that there was no evidence that the email had ever left the purview of the POB, then what I said was, it's still consistent with that, but I think that narrows it down, and I suspect that now it looks like it was a POB member based upon what you just told us. And that seems to be fairly firm evidence.
I think Joanne asked the question if there was anything you'd like to share with us as far as who you suspect.
Well, if you look at the spelling of oversight in the letter, that's consistent with the way Member St. John spells oversight in other emails.
I agree.
It wasn't me.
I agree, and I was just looking at some notes that were made and the notes that were made on the letter itself, and the handwriting seems to be consistent.
This is a witch hunt. It wasn't me. The last couple of weeks, my daughter's been in and out of the hospital in intensive care. I haven't been home. I glanced at it. This is a witch hunt.
I don't think it's a witch hunt, but we have a problem. We have a problem that started several months back, and there has to be trust among the board and the agency. And I think that that's important. There's not going to be a way for us to successfully work together if that trust is breached. And we've been hot on the heels of it for several months. And it's got to stop. Of the lack of trust and speculation and whatnot.
Let me tell you, if I had a problem.
The issue that I discussed with Director Harness is that I don't necessarily have an issue with the content of what was sent. I have an issue with the fact that things are sent circumventing this body. I do, and then the appropriateness of it, I think, was raised during our closed session as well. Just the appropriateness of reaching out to a judge.
Yeah,
If I had
it's-
a problem, I would have signed my letters, I would have taken it to the judge myself, and I had no opinion on that. I remember reading it, and I think this is a witch hunt, and this is
Well,
ridiculous.
this isn't the place to prosecute.
And you know what, another thing,
Let
I'm
me-
surprised you brought it
This is
up,
wrong to do
because
this way.
now you brought it out to the public, whereas it was just kind of in the group. It's not on Facebook, it's not on Twitter, or Albuquerque Report, or anything.
Chair Galloway and Member St. John, that letter is now a part of the court record. It is public.
Oh.
It has a document
St. John
number.
is saying she didn't do it.
So whoever did it, it doesn't reflect well on us. And this stuff needs to stop.
And when I read
It
I didn't
needs
see
to
written.
stop,
No matter where it's coming from.
no matter where it's coming from.
Fine.
Any other business?
Okay, let's make a motion and call, during this meeting, I need to get to the hospital.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.